Welcome to the Greater Goal Athletics Podcast. Today with us, we have the USA Wrestling Gold Certified Coach, the 2021 Strength Coach of the Year, and a three-time USA World Team Coach, Coach Danny Struck. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, I'm real excited to be here, Coach Grant.
Thank you. So today we want to talk about a topic that is very passionate to you, and that topic is identity.
Yeah. I get stuck on words. Coach Grant and I were talking earlier about like a word, and certain years I've got stuck on a word, or I don't know if it's something to do with my life or with the kids on the team's life or kids I have in class, life. I have a big mix of kids in class, in Jeffersonville, Indiana, where people think Indiana is all rural, but we're as inner city as it can get. We're basically, we can see Louisville, Kentucky from here. And so you got these identities, big city identities, country kid identities that they might live a town north that come down to us, urban identity, rural identity, and then all these little sub ones. So lately I've been thinking about the word identity and like what it even means. What is your identity? Is it, are you a coach? Are you a dad? Are you a teacher? And then things have an identity. It's so weird. This can, it's cold, it's hard. So like, what is its identity? And its identity can change. That's not that hard. I can crush this can. I allow my identity to change. I think kids should allow their identities to change. And what the crazy part of that is, and what I kind of want to talk about today is helping them mold that identity. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about.
Absolutely. So, talk about the characteristics of determining who or what a person or a thing is, kind of going deeper into that.
So, if you Google the word identity, it's weird. It can be seen as what you think of yourself, and it can be what others think of you. And then if you're not even talking about people, like what's the identity of this wall? So it's weird. It's a word that can be talking about, power. Like I was using the word power to you earlier. Like that could be the power of a rocket. It could be the power of a horse. It could be the power of the human spirit. So identity to me is kind of like that. It can transcend to different things. And what I would like to use the word identity today as a word that serves to establish maybe your holding place in the world at the time. If you're in high school, you probably should have a different identity than you do when you're 40 years old. But maybe some of the things are the same, like your moral character, your integrity, those should be the same. But like your identity as a student when you're 15, and your identity as a dad or a coach or a employer when you're 40. So first, I think the kids, the parents listening to this, we're going to go with two things today that I think are important are what's your identity and how do you think other people agree or disagree with what you say? I know we were talking earlier today about some kids that think they're the hardest worker on the team. Do other people see you as the hardest worker on the team? And I want to maybe be consistent in my life on what I see my identity as and what others see me as. So I'm just talking about my life. When I was in high school, when I was in elementary and middle school, I was probably seen as class clown. And if somebody would tell me that, I was proud of it. And I remember my mom saying to a teacher on the phone, Danny will fit whatever mold you put him in. And that really made me mad. But looking back as a teacher now, if the teacher thought I was a bad kid, I was going to be a bad kid. And if that teacher acted like I was a good kid, I was going to be a good kid. And I think the best teacher, my best teacher I had in high school, Howard Jones, my wrestling coach, I think he probably knew I acted like a bad kid. But since he treated me like a good kid, I fit the good kid mold. I was reading a book the other day, What the Smartest Kids in the World Learn. I forget the name of the author, but it was talking about Finland. And in the United States, we want to know all the kids like IEPs and emotional behavior plans. We have to know that. And it was interviewing a teacher in Finland, and it said, did you want to see this kid's socioeconomic. Whoa. Why would I ever want to see that? And they're like, well, in America, we got to see that. And he said, but what if I put him in that mold?
Wow.
What if he's poor and I treat him like he's a poor kid? So they actually did an experiment in Finland with an entire school for the school year. Is they gave every teacher a fake description of the kid. The teachers didn't know it. I don't think we'd ever do this in the United States because it sounds completely dangerous. But they would tell a kid, a teacher, the background of a kid. This kid is successful in everything he does. He likes to be talked to like this, yada, yada, yada. All the teachers did that. And at the end of the year, those kids all fit the mold. Then they showed the teachers the kids' background. Some of the kids that had straight A's were all D's the year before. Some of them they treated as like a higher socioeconomic type kid were really a poor kid. And the teachers all agreed that if they would have known, they would have treated them different. And I don't know that we could ever redo our educational history in the United States. It takes a lot to swing things. But in Finland, basically, they don't allow you to know anyone's identity because they don't want you to mold them. And on the same token, I used to, when I first got here in Jeffersonville, the first shirt I ever made for kids, because I had 7 kids wrestling in K through 12. And before COVID, I hit 300 kids wrestling K through 12. And the first shirt I ever made in my elementary league was I wrestle, because I wanted kids to identify as wrestlers. And I would tell them at practice, like, who are you? I'm a wrestler. Now, that worked for me 19 years ago. I don't know that I would want them to just say I'm a wrestler today. But at that point in my coaching career, it fit. I don't regret it. And I still want kids to say I wrestle, you got some really good seniors on your basketball team. I hope one of their identities is being a basketball player, but I don't know that anymore. I want to label that. I might want to put like 6 words on the back of a shirt. Like you're a wrestler and a brother and a friend, and put their identity that way. And I'll wrap up one more statement here. I heard a story a teacher tell once that, going on the same thing as a teacher telling me that I was a class clown. So I acted a class clown. It was a teacher that, remember the little label makers that you punch and it has letters?
Yes.
Right. And I'd go put Danny on this Coke, and I'd put it on this salad dressing, and you're like, oh, I'm putting on everything. This teacher every few days would type like creative and slap it on a kid's back. And it was the writer, the author of the book, saying when they were in like 4th grade, a teacher wrote creative and slapped it on his back. And he never saw himself as being creative. And today he's a writer. Wow. And maybe dropping that word to a kid to say, this is your identity, maybe a little bit.
That's awesome. It's funny you bring that up. There's a pastor, Ken Graves, that's up in Maine. I listen to him online. He's awesome. And he talks about that with his son that he had, that when he was a teenager, he learned through that experience that instead of saying, I'll treat you like a man when you act like a man, he flipped it and learned. And if he could go back and do it again, he would say, I will treat you like a man, therefore you will act like a man. And just that whole that mind change with that identity that you're giving to that young man, saying, I'm going to treat you this way because you know the difference of right or wrong. You know how to act like a man. So I will treat you that way with that expectation versus you act that way and then I'll treat you this way.
Yeah. And I'm going to identify as a man, as a child.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me a little bit more, jumping into your elementary years, kind of talk about, again, your identities as you progress through high school and forward.
To say it, I don't know if I was as bad an athlete as I tell parents I was. My dad is the best coach I ever had, 2 best coaches I ever had, my dad and my high school wrestling coach. But I remember when I was little, I liked to cause trouble. I tell our students a lot of the dumb things I did all the time. And I was so bad at T-ball. And I don't know if this is true, but I remember it. I was making fun of a kid in the crowd. This is terrible. I don't want this on tape, except for maybe somebody else has been there. I was making fun of a kid. He was missing every ball on the tee. Like there was 100 kids in the crowd. You're going to get picked by a coach, right? And I was making everybody laugh around me. I'm the clown. nobody knows that the guy running the tryouts is my dad. And maybe it was even me to my dad. He said, that kid, yes, that kid is the worst kid here. Does anyone know the second worst kid here? And everybody looked around and he's like, Danny Struck, stand up. And now I'm crying. And I just remember, like, that's how I made that other kid feel. So he was going to do that to me. And
Wow.
Now my parents always built me up. But, you know, I was labeling that other kid some identity. That probably that as a 6-year-old I was picking for him, and that's just how crazy it is for children to, you know, mold other people's identities. Kids can mold it like, hey, you're a loser, and he goes home and says, I'm the loser. So it's real important for all the coaches watching this that we're making sure we have positive words. If we in practice accidentally go, what a loser, you just missed that layup, what a loser, you just missed that bench press or double leg takedown, like, that kid might be being called a loser at home. Now, I wasn't. So my dad knew when I got home, I'm going to have another, but he wanted me to know how I made that other kid feel.
Yeah.
And I call it one of the worst 2 things I've ever done in my life. Now, my scale of what is bad is probably different than others, but like, as far as making people, I think 2 times in my life, I remember making another kid feel bad. And, I do not want my identity to be someone that makes someone else feel bad.
Yeah.
But for other kids in that crowd, if they described me that day, what's Danny Struck's identity? He makes kids feel bad. And so I remember that. And I don't ever, ever, ever want to be that kid again, right? So as an adult now, I do sometimes I'll just be sitting at my desk and go, I got to go make every kid feel good. And I'll walk around and try to say something. But, you know, so I wasn't a very good athlete. And when I got to high school, I became a wrestler because the freshman basketball coach looked at me and said, I think you'd be a really good wrestler. And I was just like, holy cow, that's my new identity. Like that was the mind shift. He didn't say you're cut from the basketball team. He said, you look like a really good wrestler. And that created an identity because of, you know, that basketball coach still today, well, you probably know Kendall Wildy. He's in the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame, I believe. He still coaches at South Decatur High School. I have great respect for this basketball coach, right? Because he made me identify as a wrestler, and I'd never wrestled. So I go to wrestling practice the next day, and for the next 4 years of high school, I was known as being obsessive. I'm a wrestler in the lunchroom. I'm a wrestler because I'm eating lettuce and not eating or eating lettuce. And in the weight room, I'm a wrestler. And honestly, the other day, a coach came up to me here in the community and said, hey, wrestling coach. And I honestly got a little bit offended because what that person doesn't know is I've coached football the same number of years as I've coached wrestling.
Wow.
So for a football kid, you know, they were like, that's my football coach. You know, I have 1,000 kids running around Jeffersonville that had me as their football coach for 18 years. So our identities come like in certain pods and groups like that coach only knew me as a wrestling coach. Football only knows me. So we got to be real careful if we want to be seen as multiple identities as coaches that we make sure we talk about multiple things to kids. So, you know, then high school or college, my first 2 years, I was known as the wrestler in college and known as the straight-laced kid. And don't ask Danny to drink or don't ask him to do anything stupid because he's not gonna. He's a wrestler. Well, I broke my back my sophomore year of college. They told me it was on my birthday. Told me I'd never wrestle again. And they didn't have the surgery. The surgery wasn't even invented in 1997 that in 2010 I was able to get. And so my last 2 years in college, if you met somebody, they would say they didn't like me. I got my sport taken away. I lost my identity. And when you lose your identity, man, like I was a jerk. I probably was not nice to people. I was grumpy. I partied more than I should. All things I'm just saying because, man, if you slipped on your identity, you can gain it back, but it's not easy. So, you know, I'm 23. I'm a coach. I got a group of people that see me as a straight-laced coach now, 23, 24, 25 years old in Greencastle, Indiana. But I still got these guys that saw me in college that think I'm wild. And I didn't like that. I remember my sister would say, I ran into somebody that went to your senior year of college with you. And I instantly go, man, like, that's not the identity I want. You know, I wanted the wrestler back. So I became a coach when I was 30 years old. I was watching the UFC and a guy on there had a surgery, and I was like, that's my back problem. So I literally called the surgeon that I heard on UFC and got the surgery from him because he was the inventor. And from the time of 30 to 39, everybody knew me again as a wrestler because I'd wrestle kids every single day in practice. I did Ironmans, I did marathons, I'd go to weightlifting competitions, and I was known again. You know, like I learned I'm in control of my identity. Like I slipped on my identity, right, in college, but it was my fault. Yeah. Like I broke my back, but I still made the choice to change my identity. You know, Batman has the choice every single time. He can be Bruce Wayne or he can be Batman. You know, we're not, you know, kind of like a superhero. Like you can make your choice on what you want to be. So from 30 to 39, I chose that. At 39, I had 5 surgeries in a 1.5-year time span. And I was super, 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 super depressed. And I think some people, Coach, you and I talk about books a lot. Like now I think people know me as a reader. I probably read 50 books a year, and they're like, oh, he's not out running. He's probably just sitting there reading. But I wanted a new identity. I didn't want to be the broke guy that had surgeries. Actually, a kid yesterday in class said, Coach, you need to break a bone again. And I was like, well, why do I need to get hurt? And he goes, all the best teams we've had here have been when you were on crutches. I don't want to, and it's right. Last year we didn't win sectionals and I didn't have a walker, but 2 years in a row at state finals, I was on a walker.
So let's bring out the crutches and we will win.
Yeah. And I was like, no, but it just goes like that. He saw me, that kid grew up for a couple years when I was having all the surgery. He saw me as the hurt coach. There's kids on my team that don't even know I ever wrestled. So you like there's the identity that they had of me, and there's the identity that I'm giving out there, and there is a middle ground, right, somewhere of well, if that's how they see you, that is probably what you're projecting on people. Right. So if somebody thinks I'm wild and I'm going, I'm not wild, well, what did I project on them? And it's a consistency. I think another whole word we could do a whole thing on would be consistent. You know, are you consistent showing up to, like, why do they see you that way? Be consistent. Because, you know, a lot of people might meet you at a party once, say you're a jerk, or say you're awesome. They might see you in a game once, say you're a jerk, or say you're awesome. But if they see you in 10 games, you could mess up once because it'd be the consistency that you have. I think identity comes with consistency. There are the you know, first impressions, but luckily in teaching, we have students 185 days, and coaching, in theory, we have them more than that if we coach them year round. And what, you know, it's a big deal to me how my wrestlers see me. Like some of them might say, you yell a lot. Keep going, please. Keep going, please. Well, you yell a lot because you care about me. Or, you know, you're like, I don't want to just be known as the guy that yells a lot. I hope that one of the things, if somebody said about me, they might go, I don't even know what he said to me, but I felt awesome when it was done. You know, or I hope my students, when I walk into basketball lifting, I swear, because I'm known as the wrestling coach, it means the world to me when your basketball players say, hey, Coach Struck, because suddenly that means, well, I'm just Coach Struck. Like, right. I coach them in the weight room. I coach like in the hallway. It's not, well, we don't talk now because you're the wrestling coach. And, you know, so that identity of being approachable, but
it is kind of funny. I hear, and you're absolutely correct with consistency and because the consistency shows your more true identity. But I also hear in some of the decisions that in your story that you've made, that identity for some people could be that 10-minute moment that you let it slip, or you make a decision, or something happens where maybe you treat somebody the wrong way, that all of a sudden that becomes your identity because – and everybody's going to make mistakes, but just how you carry yourself every single day and never knowing who's watching and how that affects your identity to others.
And I think for my life, it is a lot of if you did mess up, you can switch it. Was it Billy Madison, the guy sitting there with the lipstick on his face?
Yes.
Yeah. Billy Madison goes, sure am glad I called that guy.
Right.
Watch Billy Madison, all you movie buffs. And remember, like, Billy Madison changed, right? He made fun of this guy when he was little. He called him up and said, hey, I was a jerk, and made amends. And that guy saved his life and made the movie better. But, you know, like, we can do that with our identities. Say you're a sophomore that's seen as lazy and Pudgy. Your senior year, you could be known as the jacked hard worker. Like, you got time to change that. Kids are sad sometimes, or coaches are sad sometimes because they do have that moment and they fail in that moment. But most of the time when I fail in that moment, say, coach, you walk in and hopefully you'll never see me doing this, but I'm belittling a kid. I might not be able to fix that moment with you, but I have the whole rest of my life with a whole lot of other people that I can remember that moment and go, man, I don't ever want anybody to see me that way again. And I think kids need to remember that, like, man, that college coach did come. I got a technical and I did ruin that moment. I never want to ruin another moment because the next guy is going to have an identity he places on me too. So being able to forgive yourself and move on, creating your identity.
I see that a lot with our kids nowadays, more and more, that it seems like they have a tougher time, or they get caught up in that identity so much. If it's the one wrong thing that somebody catches on to, it's hard now with high school kids, with social media and things that you could spread and put out there about somebody and about that identity. But then I also, on the flip side, I see kids that maybe get too caught up in it because their identity now, when we grew up, our identity was just who we were with the people that we were around. Now your identity is who everyone on the internet sees.
So it's funny you just said that. I love I have weird vacations. Every vacation I take, we talked about it, is planned around, like, could I go visit a school? Could I go visit a weight room? Could I go watch a practice? So my girlfriend and I last weekend say, hey, we're going to go to Indianapolis for the weekend. So I called up New Palestine High School and I said, hey, I'd like to visit your weight room. So I go and I lift weights and I took a video and said thanks, and I posted on Twitter, thanks for letting me come and work out, because I just like to learn from other coaches. Well, their wrestling coach writes me and says, thanks. My principal was super excited that we got some press on Twitter. And he also said he loved your other tweets. And he said he'd love to meet you. And 90% of my tweets I do during WWE. Just talk, and I was like, man, that's my identity now with that one guy, right? Like, I'm that WWE fanatic. Like, okay, so I'm going to have to go meet this principal and let him know I'm a little more than that. But just social media, I got some kids in class that will constantly post their workouts. I'm not knocking any kid in class, but I got a couple of them that aren't that strong, right? Yeah. But they post so many videos of them working out. They're known as the strong guy. Like, they created their own identity. I don't know if that's good or bad, but social media will do that. I accidentally became to this one principal, the WWE fanatic. Some other kid in my class that isn't that strong is known as the strong man. And but kids on social media can also become negative things. And it's their identity to the social media world.
For sure. Talk about identifying, or how others identify you. I mean, what things we talked a little bit about that, just the perception or what you're creating.
So with kids, it's funny. I'm not trying to use real terribly labeling words, but you got the gothic kid and he's wearing all black, and you got the emo kid, and you got the preppy kid, and you got the athlete. Like, kids choose what they wear. And I remember when I was growing up, my parents would let me basically wear whatever I wanted, but I was never going to wear a rock and roll t-shirt. And they're not against music. They actually made us play an instrument. I have no idea why. They made my brother play the saxophone and the bass. They made my sister played the piano, the flute, and the violin. They made me, out of all the instruments they could put, they made me play the trombone. So there was, in 5th and 6th grade, I was the trombone kid. That was my identity in band. I have no idea why they chose that out of everything. But they wouldn't let me wear a Metallica shirt. I was allowed to go to a Metallica concert. They wouldn't let me wear it. They knew that just walking into a classroom in 1991 that some teacher would identify me and place me there. I never got that till I became a teacher, that, what I wore was an expression, right? And kids will say, I want to express myself through my clothing. And sometimes, unfortunately you are, because you're labeled that now. So I think we can identify through our clothing, I love how The Rock, like he has his Under Armour clothing. It just says work harder, or it says like nobody cares, work harder. Like it's a statement on just what he thinks about himself. So your clothing, what you listen to, kids think that's not a big deal. But if I came into the weight room and it's just all cuss words and it's Coach Grant's team in there, like, oh, he must let his kids cuss. That's your team identity. And I don't know that kids realize there's team identities. I hope that my demeanor rubs off on your kids. And I think that your teams, after a couple years, match the coach's demeanor. If you got this super aggressive, watch a team that has a coach that gets a lot of technicals. The kids get a lot of technicals. Mm-hmm. If that coach I've never had a technical in my career, I bet the kids have done very few questionable things on the court. Same thing in wrestling. Like I've been written up twice in 23 years by the same referee. And I've maybe had one kid written up by the IHSA, but I think it would swing the other way in that pendulum. So your team identity, your coaching identity, I think your kids already know you're a coach. And the other day I was in here and I think you had to run and get your 1-year-old.
Yes.
And all of a sudden your identity now is, oh, coach is a dad.
Yeah.
And but like a kid that wasn't here that day might not know it. And I think coaches need to allow them to see your family. Like it's a real big deal to me. I try to have the team. Too big a team to have them all to my house. I have a little house, but hey, all freshmen are coming over tonight. I want them to have the identity of, oh, coach loves dogs. Oh, coach has this hobby, or like in my house I have a lot of travel pictures. Coach the Traveler, so that I'm not just. If you only have one identity, you can only relate to the kids in one way.
Right.
So I want an umbrella of identity. Maybe the holder, the stick to my umbrella is coach, and then there's all this. But I think some ways we can do that. And what we do, first thing I do every year in class is I make them pick a fight song, and I literally play the song, fight song, and I make them sit there. And some kids giggle because they've never had to sit for 5 minutes and be quiet and listen, right? But then at the end, I ask them for their fight song, and they put it on a card, and then I make a playlist for first period based on there. So when that period's going, hey, that's Billy's favorite song. That's Will's favorite song. That's Starks' favorite song. That's, Kobe's favorite song. And I can identify a little bit with that kid, but then I'll hear the lyrics a lot of times and I'll call the kid over and I'll go, man, that's awesome. Like you picked I Want It All by Queen. Like I want it all. Oh, or you picked this questionable song. Why'd you pick that? You want your 6-year-old brother? And usually if I say that, I'll say, you got a younger brother? Yeah. Do you want your younger brother to identify you with that? Mm-hmm. No. I'm like, so remember, this is your walkout song. This is what you go to the pitcher's mound with. Everybody in the world identifies you as. So the first thing we do is I make them pick a song, and I do that with all my students in all my classes. Towards the end of the year, we do self-affirmations. So around like state tourney times, I do it 2 ways. I'll write what I want to trick the kid into their identity. Like I know I'm going to speak wrestling. The kid our kid's going to face in the finals at regionals, has a hell of a double leg takedown. So I'm telling this kid I am fantastic at defending double legs. And one of his identities under his umbrella is that's what he's great at. And every coach on my team has that script, and they know when they're walking around the room, they have to drop those one-liners to the kids. Mm-hmm. Then eventually I hand those one-liners to the kids and I tell them to speak them to themselves. So they self-affirmate. Nobody's working harder than me. Nobody can take me down. Nobody, whatever it is, I'm confident at the free throw line. I'm trying to be real careful about never putting impossible statements. Yeah. If a kid said, I'm going to hit every free throw, it's probably a lie. If he said, I do my best to go through my routine every time I'm at the free throw line, that's controllable. So the self-affirmations, I make identities. We journal a lot. Every Monday I have them journal, and I'll just flat out say, like, if I met you this weekend, what are 3 things that would identify you over the weekend? And sometimes you can see a look on a kid's face. And I'm like, oh, you weren't very good this weekend, were you? But then you'll see somebody else write down, like, I'm a runner, I'm a lifter, and I'm a brother, like something like that. Or we talk different words. I'll just start yelling words: empowering, supportive, like what are you identifying at? And then we do the same thing with a partner, or sometimes we'll do it with a whole group. I'll just have to look at your partner and tell him what you think of him. Now, I want it to be positive. Sometimes I'm allowing not to be positive. Like, yeah, we have a bad practice or a bad meet. Guys, we all know why we lost that meet. I want you to be real honest with your partner. And you'll hear a partner going, you're always late, dude, and I can't count on you to be here. And when you're late, I don't get as much practice time. So I need you to shift that identity. And sometimes when a peer looks at them and tells them the same thing I've been telling them, but he don't want to listen to me. I'm 45 and gray beard, and they don't want to listen. So me and my best friend thinks that of me, and they're mad for a day, and I'm mad at Billy, and I'm like, well, change his perception of you, change your identity. Like, and I do one more thing I do in our power when I have a same talk like this with power is I show a list of superpowers on there. And I tell the kids when I'm doing this to pick which superpower they want. Then we do a game where they pick their alter superpower, like something like if you can be the world's strongest man, but every time you use your super strength, you poop your pants or something. Just something dumb. Like, what power would you want if there was a downfall? Every time I fly, I pee my pants. So they got to really be selective on what power they want. And then we just say, like, well, dude, you are powerful. Like Clark Kent, Superman, Flash, they all change identities. When they're in a certain role, they change identities. So just like Coach, now there should be certain things that transcend, like your integrity, your moral character, your ethics. If I'm on time for work, I should be on time for basketball practice. I should be on time for weightlifting. Those should transcend. But there are things like the intensity of Coach Grant's on the basketball court might hopefully not be the same intensity when he's pushing the swing. So telling the kids that they can pull the hood on and off, and it's okay to have 2 identities, to be the super caring, sappy older brother to his younger sister, and then to be the monster on the court. It's okay to change, but the intangibles of I care about my teammates, I care about my sister, that's going back and forth. So the identity can change, but there's that stick to the umbrella is still there.
I heard something. I don't know where I got this from, but I heard it recently, and it was talking about if you want to up your game when you're on the court, or being able to flip that switch, essentially, when you step onto the court or you step onto the field or whatever it is. It was a strategy, and it was create a Viking myth about yourself or about who you want to be. And it was talking about, you hear about the old, you've seen the movies, and what's the show? I'm drawing a blank now, the real popular one, Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And so like Game of Thrones, so they have like mythical creatures and all this stuff. And it's like, if you want to flip that switch, what is your Viking myth that you become whenever you go onto the field or the court or whatever it is?
Yeah.
And sit down and create a whole story behind what that is. So when you step onto there, you flip that switch and you become that myth.
They might be, you could tell I'm obsessed with superheroes. So I might say, like, what's your comic book? Mm-hmm. You wrote your comic book. What is it? I was listening to good podcast, Jack O'Sullivan, Changing the Game podcast. Yeah. And he was talking in his podcast about how he would have them write their Cinderella story. So everything went right at Semi-State today. What did that look like? Man, everybody on the bus was so happy. And you literally just write the ending in as much detail as you can. And then, like, that's you, man. That's you. And I think one day I'm going to have all my weightlifting classes do it because, it's the same for everybody. My Cinderella story, it's more important for me to make our athletes just like you. I want them all to reach their genetic potential and become the best versions of themselves they can be. But I'm a competitor. I still want to win a state title. And that Cinderella story for all of them is the same. Like I could dictate My senior wrestler and Will Lovingwats's Cinderella story, almost the same. We all got onto that bus and all our families came and we cried and it was great. And why though? What made it special? Well, everybody saw me as, a charismatic player. They saw me as a supportive player. What was your identity during it? Were you the guy, even if you're on the bench, what's your identity? Ooh, he's a great role player. He's behind us. He's, there's an identity to everybody that is needed. What talent do you have while you're on the bench? Maybe you're smarter than the guy on the court. And when he sits out, you can tell him what to do. But that's got to be your identity. And you need to recognize an honest identity. When you were talking about the Viking thing, that is when the switch, I talked to them about if you could listen. I'm better at this with wrestling because I have them so often, but I will pick a team song that they start identifying with. And it's funny, like I'll have guys 20 years later, when they hear that song on the radio, they call me. I got a kid that lives in Kansas now, Jimmy Pratt. He calls me every time, So Far Away by Stained. Now that we're here, So Far Away. And it's a song about a guy or a band, right, that had this life and they kept working and here they are. He calls me every time he hears that song on the radio because, I tell him like, I'm sorry, Jimmy, I love you. If you're listening to this, you were a turd in 8th grade. And dude, you're the best dad now. Like he has 3 kids. He's a businessman. He is the best. And so that song, when he was a senior, I told him, reminded him, and that's become him and I's song. So on their fight song, I try to get it to be one that a not just for state finals. I wanted to put hair on their arms standing on end right before the game. Everybody knows the ding, 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 ding for the Chicago Bulls when they were going out there. But I mean, that was it. Like everybody in the crowd was tingling because they identified that with that championship and those 6 championships. They played that song through all 6. So for some kids, their identity song is even the national anthem. Kneeling, standing, whatever it is, because that was played before every single time they went out. And I always tell kids, man, if you could make that your song, I'm not trying to be political. I'm just saying it. The last thing you hear before that game starts, if that was your switch song, man, you're going to be dangerous. Chris Jericho is the lead singer of Fozzy. Yes. And he has a song called Unstoppable. 2 years ago, it was our song. And I still got guys like if I talk to they're wrestling like their sophomore, junior year now in college, I'll say, what do you do to flip your switch? And they'll say, I play my song from my senior year. But that song they identify with, going back to the word identity, and it gets them. I'm doing this because have you ever seen Over the Top?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, so I'm going to send you a link. Rocky in it, not Rocky, Sylvester Stallone, it's a truck driver, and he's a professional arm wrestler.
Okay.
And before every single time, he turns his hat backwards, and he wins every time he turns his hat backwards. But to me, that's just symbolizing like athletes, right? Like, do I dribble the ball 3 times before I shoot it? Right. Before a free throw. I got wrestlers that take a back step every time they shoot. Like there is a ritual to every great athlete that they do right before it, and it's just funny and over the top. Take my hand over the top, and that he flips the switch he literally flips the switch, and he goes, "Hey, yo, I flip the switch every time." And but it'd be great, honestly, for kids to see in a talk like this.
Yeah, for sure. You'll appreciate this. So my team that I had at Providence that went to the semi-state that year, about halfway through the year, they would always want to listen to music. The first 30 minutes of practice, we would listen to pump up music while we were doing our skill work and stretching and all that, just to get our minds right. And they would always want to put on this just hard, music that you would listen to. You think, man, we're physical, we're tough. And we just kind of went through a stretch where we were not. And so I told him, I said, we are going to play the music that fits our identity. And so I put on Backstreet Boys, I Want It That Way, and some Britney Spears and things like that. I'm not kidding you. By the end of the year, we are on our way to games and on our way home on the bus, and they are blaring Backstreet Boys, I Want It That Way. But that became their identity, and like they unified around that. And we actually never went back to putting on the pump up music They were just like, oh, coach is going to challenge us this way, and we're going to show him that we're going to be tough even with this soft music on.
As long as it flips the switch, it didn't matter what song.
Yeah, and so like I hear that now, and it takes me back to those bus rides, heading home when I hear those songs. And
that'd be a great podcast right there, just the songs that you identify with. Because like it's taking you back there. And that's what I want of those songs to do with our kids is I want them to have to call me, years later. I want them to call their friend and go, hey, guess what I'm hearing on the radio right now? And I beat that in their head, but it really is to create an identity. And most people, this is something I tell my wrestlers on identity. I actually tell it to every kid in class, but in wrestling is the only one that I'm with them on their last. I'm not in your locker room on your last game each year, but I'm in the locker room when that senior loses his last match. Everybody loses. Pretty much in every sport, everybody loses their last game, right? Unless you're state champ. So I'm telling you, like, guys, there's a day that you're done. There's a day you're done. It might be college, it might be pro, it might be high school, and it's okay when it's done. But that song is always going to be there, right? And so for some people, the song's sad, but hopefully one day we're over it and the song's always going to end up being happy. Like I'm sure my senior year, my high school wrestling coach played to us Running Down a Dream over and over and over. Tom Betty, Running Down a Dream. After my senior year, I didn't win state. I couldn't listen to the song. But today when I'm lifting weights, I'm playing it and I'm thinking of my high school wrestling team. Because eventually, the awesome thing that music does for us is every time I hear that song for 5 minutes, I identify as a high school wrestler again. The funnest time of my life. And no matter how sad I am, I'm identifying happiness for 5 minutes. If I could get a playlist of 30 songs that make me happy, dang, that's a pretty awesome day.
Yeah. For sure. Well, we're getting close on time here, but I wanted to have you back on and talk a little bit more about identity because we had a really good conversation earlier before we got on here, and I was sharing a little bit with you about sometimes what happens when, and this was for me, like when your identity gets out of whack, or maybe you put too much emphasis on your identity, and if something doesn't match that identity, it kind of messes with you a little bit, and I think that can happen as well. So I would like to talk more in another session about that and just how we can be like very intentional about our identity, but also not getting so caught up in it that it is only who we are. And if we don't have that, being able to reel it back in. So, but with that being said, I appreciate you coming on. This is great, tremendous stuff. And I look forward to doing a lot more of these.
Yeah. Thank you, Coach. I appreciate it.